Hello, I can't see if it started recording yet, so I'm just going to give it a few seconds and then I'll say hello again because I can't see. Yep, we started. Hello, I'm going to be telling a story today, one that will hopefully just challenge your conceptual view of a spiritual reality. I don't know how true it is. It's probably not, but I thought I'd share nonetheless because well, one, I wanted to, and two, because I'm trying to set myself up to do some tattooing today, and I'm a bit traumatized. My vision keeps coming and going, and as I said, I've got some physical discomforts at present, and I'm gonna be setting myself up. That's the whole point. I thought I'd do the video at the same time because I couldn't focus on setting myself up. So I thought I'd do the video, share something, give something, and distract myself, and get some of this extra oxygen I seem to have trapped in me out. So yeah, I'll just give you an update very quickly. I've been having trouble with my eyes. They keep going from extremes, from crystal clear vision to just like absolute blurriness, and I'm not able to focus. But more than anything, it's like I've got something in them. That's all right. That's not too bad. That happens. But what it is, as I said, I've got some physical discomforts at present, and where I'm quite weak, not being able to see, and the feeling of something stuck in your eye with all the other discomforts is quite humbling. So I'm a bit traumatized from earlier, and I'm a bit shaken. So that's what I think is holding me up today from just setting myself up and just getting a grip with the discomforts and the weakness, the sensitivities. So let's go into the story. The story is a story of a shared life, and I'm going to do something different today. I'm gonna give I'm gonna make a lead character. It just seems appropriate for this story because it's quite complex. The conceptual view I'm going to try and express. So I think it makes it easier to have it even more as a story with characters or character. And the character is called Sarah Jane. I don't know why. Or Sally Jane. It should have been Sally Jane, but we've gone with Sarah Jane today. Yeah, the name Sally Jane just popped into my head, and my mental health wouldn't leave it alone. I think it liked the name, so I'm going to stick with it, or at least change it to Sarah because I've made a mistake. I don't think it matters too much. But the story is following a fictional character called Sarah Jane, and this character could be anybody alive. It could be me, it could be you, it could be your granddad, it could be your dog, it could even be your dog. So essentially, once upon a time, Sarah Jane was born. And Sarah Jane lived her life. But like many of us, Sarah Jane has troubles and difficulties and problems. Now, I'll leave it up to each and every one of you to fill in the blanks in terms of what's the most destructive thing to life, to humans, to being alive. Because the most destructive thing to a human being, it could even vary, but I'll leave it up to you to fill it in for Sarah Jane. For me, from my spiritual teachings, I'm led to believe depression is the problem for humanity. So let's say depression as a result of fear. And Sarah Jane lived her life, and she had good times, she had bad times. She enjoyed herself sometimes, she beat herself up sometimes. And that's not the important part. The important part is that Sarah Jane isn't alone. Sarah Jane is but the culmination of every human being alive that has ever lived. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that we see the world as it is today. I'm pretty sure we'd struggle to conceive another reality, another world, a world based on the same principles but has ended up somewhere else. So, let's take Sarah Jane and let's rewind. Now, essentially, Sarah Jane is the centre of the universe. Sarah Jane is the centre of time. Sarah Jane is the Big Bang. Sarah Jane is the Big Bang, but the Big Bang hasn't happened yet. The Big Bang wasn't at the beginning of time, like in the past. The Big Bang was at the beginning of time in the future. Now, I'm really pushing myself because I don't have the energy to be doing this. I've just realised, but I'm gonna finish because I don't know. So, once upon a time, we've all lived Sarah Jane's life. And Sarah Jane's ultimate challenge is to overcome her fears and overcome depression as a subsequent result. But first and foremost, it's for her to overcome her fears. Now, I lived Sarah Jane's life once, and the world was a simpler place. We lived in huts. The grass was green. We had a few animals. We ate healthily. We lived a blissful life, but we still had fear. Now, when I lived Sarah Jane's life, there was only a handful of people on the planet. And I lived her life, and I failed. I don't know how it ended for me in that life. It could be just we die early. And when I lived Sarah Jane's life, I failed, and I died. So what happens to me is that we go back. We live Sarah Jane's life again. But because I've had my turn, I incarnate as another human being to Sarah Jane. The focus is Sarah Jane's life, not the consciousness, but her life. And we all revolve around Sarah Jane. So when I reincarnate, my challenge depending upon how I failed in Sarah Jane's life, it's like to overcome my karma to her. So it might be a case of I bump into Sarah Jane one day, and in that lifetime I was afraid to speak to strangers, and in this lifetime I've overcome my fear. And not only that, when I speak to Sarah Jane, when I bump into Sarah Jane, I overcome my fear that I died in that life too. And in turn, that interaction gives Sarah Jane something. It's like I'm helping her. I'm helping this other consciousness that's now having a go in Sarah Jane. Let's call it Fred. Fred, what's his name? Actually, let's call him Frank Sinatra. So Frank Sinatra is now having a go in Sarah Jane's life, in her incarnation. And obviously he will fail because he's Frank Sinatra, and we know Frank Sinatra. And when Frank Sinatra reincarnates, he overcame his fear of not being able to sing, which he had in Sarah Jane's life. And he's another individual now in this world to Sarah Jane. And in this life he lived that fear, he overcame that fear. And ultimately, no doubt, Sarah Jane will be able to hear that music one day. And within that music, there'll be a helpful answer to how Frank Sinatra failed to help Sarah Jane. Now, slowly, you can imagine that from once upon a time living by nature, living simplicity, simplistically, as more and more people fail, the population of the planet at this point in time in the future is going to increase and increase and increase until we have about 8 billion people on the planet from just having a handful. So, I'm going to put it, it's like, oh, so it's like you can affect someone from the concept of a butterfly effect. A butterfly effect might flap its wings in one continent and a tsunami in another continent, and it's that sort of concept. So it could almost be like the closer you got to overcoming your fears, because, for instance, the Chinese, they're renowned for energy work. So it could be that Quan Li has reincarnated from failing in Sarah Jane's life by not managing his energy appropriately. And that's a common trait. So what they've done, just by, not by design, but by the way the universe works and by the way time works, when Quan Li reincarnates, he reincarnates as a Chinaman. And in this life, he practices energy work. And that's all he needs to do. Because energy can be felt as a polarization all over the planet. So that's all his focus is, to give good in terms of energy. And then you get to Australia, and then you get to different polarizations across the planet. And the subtleties of how you fail in one life and the things you have to overachieve. And how you give back to Sarah Jane so she can actually overcome her fears. Because once she overcomes her fears, she becomes enlightened. But I believe she becomes enlightened to the world, the whole world becomes enlightened. You know, we've all lived Sarah Jane's life. And it happens in an instant. You know, I talk about we live her life and we die and we incarnate. But it's instantaneous, you know. It's like there's no time. We're so similar, I believe, on a soul level, that it's just like our experiences of the past that have separated us. So, from this point in the future, let's call it 15 years before she becomes enlightened, getting over her fears, where originally, when I failed, it was like blissful, living by nature, just animals, and, you know, having everything there for you, but I couldn't overcome my fears. Not only does the population grow of that time period, but the population grows of the past. So we create an ever more complex history. And it's happening simultaneously. You know, it's like before anything ever happened, from the ancient Romans to the ancient Egyptians to the Sumerians, blah, blah, blah. This happened first. It's like this point in the future happened first as a conscious happening, and then the past was created as a result. So if we go back in time, it's almost like the more of us that have failed at her life, the more complex, so that Sarah Jane is able to reflect and create the appropriate future. So, we're all expecting a big bang in about 15 years. But that's what I mean. It's a shared life. It's just a concept that came to me of how reality could be, because nobody knows. And if nobody knows, then, well, this is just as valid, as much as it's far out there. But hey, man, if anyone can tell me how the universe works, how space works, and how the laws up there don't apply down here, and then I'll listen. But until then, it's valid. So anyway, how far do we all think we got in Sarah Jane's life?